Welcome to Happy Days Today. We're going to be doing I was trying to do the whole thing without blinking, but talking fast is not up. Okay, first up we're going to be doing Bible verse with JJ. Then we are going to be doing devotions with Daniel. We're having a little technical, okay, no technical difficulty. And then we are going to be, after the Bible verse with JJ, then we're going to do daily verses with Daniel, and then we're going to read the Bible, and then we're going to do substance with Kimberly. Then we're going to read the Return of the King. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell. And yes, I am missing my pet T-Rex, so handle with caution.
You may lose limbs.
Yeah. But handle him with caution. If you're nice to him, he'll be nice to you. If you're not nice to him, yeah. Okay. Right here. Hebrews 6:19. We have this as a sure and steadfast or anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain. I'm not good at reading. Let me do that one more time. We have this as a sure that steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain. That was way better than my first run, so.
Do you know what curtain they're talking about? The Holy of Holies in the tabernacle.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Okay.
Now we're going to be doing daily devotions with Daniel. Ah!
I have an ugly face. Oh gosh. Okay. Specks and planks. Can anybody guess what that is? Anybody?
I know.
What?
You take the log out of your own eye and take the speck out of your brother's.
Okay.
Actually, it doesn't say take the speck
He's
out of
right.
the others.
He's right. Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Matthew 7:5. Early in the film account of the near-disastrous Apollo 13 spaceflight, astronaut Jim Lovell is in his backyard looking up at the moon that hangs small in the night sky. He holds up his thumb to block out the entire moon from his sight. How could something so large be obscured by the view of something so small? It's all a matter of perspective. Things often aren't as they seem. Sometimes a small thing can obscure something larger and more important. For instance, we may see the sin in the life of another person, but fail to see our own giant, judgmental attitude. The small sin of another has blocked our view of our own larger problem. Jesus put it this way: don't worry about the speck in another's eye until you've removed the plank from your own eye. Until our own eye is clear from a judgmental spirit, we are unqualified to judge the sins of another. Yes, the other person may have sinned, but God has not appointed us the judge of him or her. Of all the sins in the world, God calls us to be concerned about only one before another. Our own. Once we have removed our plank, we can help our brother remove his speck. No man's conscience is to be a judge for another. C.H. Spurgeon.
Bible fun with Dad.
Hello.
are we today? Okay, we've got the dogs being especially hovering today. So, alrighty, and we've got all kinds of allergies going on today, so it's lovely. We have got 2 people. Hello, 2 people. We're on Acts chapter 6. This is the English Standard Version. Let me begin. Oh, Rebecca says hello, kiddos. English Standard Version, let me begin. Now in these days, when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists arose against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. And the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples and said, "It is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we will appoint to this duty. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word." And what they said pleased the whole gathering, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch. These they set before the apostles, and they prayed and laid their hands on them. And the word of God continued to increase, and the number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests became obedient to the faith. And Stephen, full of grace and power, was doing great wonders and signs among the people. Then some of these who belonged to the synagogue of the freedmen, as it was called, and of the Cyrenians, and of the Alexandrians, and those of Cilicia and Asia, rose up and disputed with Stephen, but they could not withstand the wisdom and the spirit with which he was speaking. Then they secretly instigated men who said, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and God." And they stirred up the people and elders and the scribes, and they came upon him and seized him and brought him before the council. And they set up false witnesses who said, "This man never ceases to speak words against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and will change the customs that Moses delivered to us." And gazing at him, all who sat in the council saw that his face was like the face of an angel. And now let me continue to chapter 7. And the high priest said, what?
Why does that mean the face of an angel?
Probably.
That's what his face looked like. And the high priest said, Are these things so?" And Stephen said, "Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, 'Go out from your land and from your kindred, and go into the land that I will show you.' Then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there into this land in which you are now living. Yet he gave him no inheritance in it, not even a foot's length, but promised to give to him as a possession and to his offspring after him, though he had no child. And God spoke to this effect, that his offspring would be sojourners in a land belonging to others, who would enslave them and afflict them 400 years. But I will judge the nation that they serve, said God, and after that they shall come out and worship me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham became the father of Isaac, and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob of the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt. But God was with him, and rescued him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who made him ruler over Egypt and over all his household. Now there came a famine throughout all Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out our fathers on their first visit, and on the second visit Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. And Joseph sent and summoned Jacob his father and all his kindred, 75 persons in all. And Jacob went down into Egypt, and he died, he and our fathers. And they were carried back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham had brought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. But as the time of the promise drew near, which God had granted to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt until there arose over Egypt another king who did not know Joseph. He dealt shrewdly with our race and forced our fathers to expose their infants so that they would not be kept alive. At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight. And he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house, and when he was exposed, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in his words and deeds. When he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian. He supposed that his brothers would understand that God was giving them salvation by his hand, but they did not understand. And on the following day he appeared to them as they were quarreling and tried to reconcile them, saying, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong each other?" But the man who was wronging his neighbor thrust him aside, saying, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you did the Egyptian yesterday?" As at this retort, Moses fled and became an exile in the land of Midian, where he became the father of 2 sons. Now when 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai, in a flame of fire in a bush. When Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight, and as he drew near to look, there came the voice of the Lord, "I am God. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, and of Isaac, and of Jacob." And Moses trembled and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, "Take off the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their groaning, and I have come down to deliver them. And now, come, I will send you to Egypt." This Moses whom they rejected, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge?" This man God sent as both ruler and redeemer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. This man led them out, performing wonders and signs in Egypt, and at the Red Sea, and in the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moses who said to the Israelites, "God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers." This is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him at Mount Sinai and with our fathers. He received living oracles to give to us. Our fathers refused to obey him, but thrust him aside, and in their hearts they turned to Egypt, saying to Aaron, Make for us gods who will go before us. As for this Moses who led us out from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days, and offered a sacrifice to the idol, and were rejoicing in the works of their hands. But God turned away and gave them over to worship the hosts of heaven, as it was written in the book of the prophets. Did you bring me slain beasts and sacrifices during the 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You took up the tent of Molech, and the star of your god Rephan, the images that you made to worship, and I will send you into exile beyond Babylon. Our fathers had the tent of witness in the wilderness, just as he who spoke to Moses directed him to make it, according to the pattern that he had seen. Our fathers, in turn, brought it in with Joshua when they dispossessed the nations that God drove out before our fathers. So it was until the days of David, who found favor in the sight of God and asked to find a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built a house for him. Yet the Most High does not dwell in houses made by hands, as the prophet says, "Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me, says the Lord? Or what is the place of my rest? Did not my hand make all these things? You stiff-necked people, uncircumcised in heart and ears, you always resist the Holy Spirit. As your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who announced beforehand the coming of the righteous one, whom you have now betrayed and murdered, you who received the law as delivered by angels and did not keep it. Now when they heard these things, they were enraged, and they ground their teeth at him. But he, full of the Holy Spirit, gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And he said, Behold, I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. But they cried out with a loud voice and stopped their ears and rushed together at him. Then they cast him out of the city and stoned him, and the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. And as they were stoning Stephen, he called out, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And falling to his knees, he cried out with a loud voice, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. And that is where we will stop for today. And tomorrow we will talk about Saul, this young man named Saul, and what he did shortly thereafter. So, that is the story of Stephen. And you need to take allergy medicine more often.
So do you.
You take your meds?
All right.
Use your spray.
Not you, but somebody else in the room. So we are on chapter 8 now, the Houses of Healing. We just left the Pelennor Fields and the Pyre of Denethor. Denethor was really, he was like the only sane one there. He had decided that he wanted to save Faramir, and so Faramir was trying to burn himself, and Denethor, you can't just without coming over and correcting me. And Denethor was really just trying to do the right thing there, and Gandalf came in and here's Kimberly to say what really happened.
Okay.
I didn't kill anybody.
Yet.
It went on for a little longer.
Okay, so yeah, if he went on 5 seconds later, he would have said that Faramir threw a torch at Denethor and he died.
No, Gandalf, he died.
Denethor did die.
I know. But what actually happened was Denethor went completely
I
crazy.
don't like how they did it in the movie better.
He went completely nutso. And so Pippin, he went okay.
There's a couple of places
Like-
that I really like the movie better.
Like the king, the steward, sorry. He was like, you know, Pippin, you go get some wood and some oil, and I'm gonna go burn myself. And so he's like, okay. And then he goes over and says, hey Gandalf, I need your help right now. And so he goes over with Gandalf, and they see them like completely soaked in oil. They see Faramir completely soaked in oil, lying on a bed of wood, and them about to like kill him and everything. And then they're like, no, we don't do that. And Gandalf went and grabbed Faramir, and then, long story short, Denethor killed himself. He jumped on the wood and burned himself alive. And then they saw what happened in the chapter before that, and how the king of Rohan died, and how Merry had a part in defeating the king of the Nazgul. I thought that was really cool. Like, at the very beginning, Mary was completely and utterly terrified, like, not even able to move. And then suddenly, he's the one helping kill the Nazgul. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to hand it off to Dad, who's going to read us a story.
I need that.
Oh, sorry. That's your reading pillow.
That is, it keeps my back from dying every night. All right, so I have to say, I think there are two scenes that I can think of right off the top of the bat, in which I actually like the way the changes that they made in the movie. I might get total. If you stop watching me because of these comments, then that's okay. But there's two places where I really like the changes that they made in the movie adaptation of this, and one of them is the Pyre of Denethor sequence, and the other one is where Éowyn slays the Ringwraith. I just like the way that they did them.
Bad Bobo, the way they wrote it.
In the movie. So, all right. This is chapter 8, the Houses of Healing, and let me begin. A mist was in Mary's eyes of tears and weariness when they drew near the ruined gate of Minas Tirith. He gave little heed to the wreck and slaughter that lay about all. Fire and smoke and stench was in the air, for many enemies had been burned or cast into the fire pits, and many of the slain also were here and there lay many carcasses of great southern monsters, half burned or broken by stone cast or shot through the eyes by the valiant archers of Mort Hond. The flying rain had ceased for a time, and the sun gleamed up above, but all the lower city was still wrapped in a smoldering reek. Already men were laboring to clear a way through the jetsam of battle, and now out from the gate came some bearing litters. Gently they laid Éowyn upon soft pillows, but the king's body they covered with a great cloth of gold, and they bore torches about him, and their flame, pale in the sunlight, were fluttered by the wind. So Theoden and Éowyn came into the city of Gondor, and all who saw them bared their heads and bowed, and they passed through the ash and fume of the burned circle, and went on and up along the streets of stone. To Mary the ascent seemed age-long, a meaningless journey in a hateful dream, going on and on to some dim ending that memory cannot seize. Slowly the lights of the torches in front of him flickered and went out, and he was walking in the darkness, and he thought, "This is a tunnel leading to a tomb. There we shall stay forever." But suddenly into his dream there fell a living voice. "Well, Mary, thank goodness I found you." He looked up, and the mist before his eyes cleared a little. There was Pippin. They were face to face in a narrow lane, and but for themselves it was empty. He rubbed his eyes. "Where is the king?" he said, "and Éowyn?" Then he stumbled and sat down on a doorstep and began to weep again. "They have gone up into the citadel," said Pippin. "I think you must have fallen asleep on your feet and taken the wrong turning. When we found that you were not with them, Gandalf sent me to look for you. Poor old Mary, how glad I am to see you again, but you are worn out, and I won't bother you with any talk. But tell me, are you hurt or wounded?" "No," said Mary. "Well, no, I don't think so. But I can't use my right arm, Pippin, not since I stabbed him, and my sword burned all the way like a piece of wood, all away like a piece of wood." Pippin's face was anxious. "Well, you had better come with me as quick as you can," he said. "I wish I could carry you. You aren't fit to walk any further. They shouldn't have let you walk at all, but you must forgive them. So many dreadful things have happened in the city, Mary, that one poor hobbit coming in from the battle is easily overlooked." "It is not always a misfortune being overlooked," said Mary. "I was overlooked just now by... No, I can't speak of it. Help me, Pippin. It's all going dark again, and my arm is so cold." "Lean on me, Merry lad," said Pippin. "Come now, foot by foot, it's not far." "Are you going to bury me?" said Merry. "No, indeed," said Pippin, trying to sound cheerful, though his heart was wrung with fear and pity. "No, we are going to the houses of healing." They turned out of the lane that ran between tall houses and the outer wall of the fourth circle, and they regained the main street, climbing up to the citadel. Step by step they went, while Merry swayed and murmured as one in sleep. "I'll never get him there," thought Pippin. Is there no one to help me? I can't leave him here." Just then, to his surprise, a boy came running up behind, and as he passed, he recognized Burgle, Bergon's son. "Hello, Burgle," he called. "Where are you going? Glad to see you again, and still alive." "I am running errands for the healers," said Burgle. "I cannot stay." "Don't," said Pippin, "but tell them up there that I have a sick hobbit, a Perrine, mind you, come from the battlefield. I don't think he can walk so far. If Mithrandir is there, he will be glad of the message." Burgle ran on. "I'd better wait here," thought Pippin, so he let Merry sink gently down onto the pavement in a patch of sunlight, and then he sat down beside him, laying Merry's head on his lap. He felt his body and limbs gently, and took his friend's hands in his own. The right hand felt icy to the touch. It was not long before Gandalf himself came in search of them. He stooped over Merry and caressed his brow, then he lifted him carefully. "He should have been born in honor to this city," he said. "He has well repaid my trust, for if Elrond had not yielded to me, neither of you would have set out, and then far more grievous would the evils of this day have been." He sighed. "And yet here is another charge on my hands, while all the time the battle hangs in the balance." So at last Faramir and Eowyn and Meriadoc were laid in beds in the houses of healing, and there they were tended well. For though all lore was in these latter days fallen from its fullness of old, the leechcraft of Gondor was still wise, and skilled in the healing of wound and hurt, and all such sickness as east of the sea mortal men were subject to, save old age only, for that they have found no cure, and indeed the span of their lives had now waned to little more than that of other men, and those among them who passed the tale of 50 years with vigor were grown few, save in some houses of purer blood. But now their art and knowledge were baffled, for there were many sick of a malady that would not be healed, and they called it the Black Shadow, for it came from the Nazgul, and those who were stricken with it fell slowly into an ever deeper dream, and then passed to silence and a deadly cold, and so died. And it seemed to the tenders of the sick that on the halfling and on the Lady of Rohan this malady lay heavily. Still, at whiles, as the morning wore away, they would speak, murmuring in their dreams, and the watchers laid listening to all that they said, hoping perhaps to learn something that would help them to understand their hurts. But soon they began to fall down into the darkness, and as the sun turned west, a grey shadow crept over their faces. But Faramir burned with a fever that would not abate. Gandalf went from one to the other full of care, and he was told all that the watchers could hear, and so the day passed, while the great battle outside went with shifting hopes and strange tidings, and still Gandalf waited and watched and did not go forth, till at last the red sunset filled all the sky, and the light through the windows fell on the grey faces of the sick. Then it seemed to those who stood by that in the glow, the faces flushed softly as with health returning, but it was only a mockery of hope. Then an old wife, Lorith, the eldest of the women who served in that house, looking on the fair face of Faramir, wept, for all the people loved him, and she said, "Alas, if he should die! Would that there were kings in Gondor, as there were once upon a time, they say. For it is said in old lore, the hand of the king are the hands of a healer, and so the rightful king could ever be known." And Gandalf, who stood by, said, "Men may long remember your words, Lorith, for there is hope in them. Maybe a king has indeed returned to Gondor, or have you not heard the strange tidings that have come to the city?" "I have been too busy with this and that to heed all the crying and shouting," she answered. "All I hope is that those murdering devils do not come to this house and trouble the sick." Then Gandalf went out in haste, and already the fire in the sky was burning out, and the smoldering hills were fading, while ash-gray evening crept over the fields. Now as the sun went down, Aragorn and Éomer and Imrahil drew near the city with their captains and knights, and when they came before the gate, Aragorn said, "Behold the sun setting in the great fire. It is a sign of the end and fall of many things, and a change in the tides of the world. But this city and realm has rested in the charge of the stewards for many long years, and I fear that if I enter it unbidden, then doubt and debate may arise, which should not be while this war is fought. I will not enter in, nor make any claim until it be seen whether we or Mordor shall prevail. Men shall pitch my tents upon the field, and here I will await the welcome of the lord of the city." But Éomer said, "Already you have raised the banner of the kings and displayed the tokens of Elendil's house. Will you suffer these to be challenged?" "No," said Aragorn, "but I deem the time unripe, and I have no mind for strife except with our enemy and his servants." And the Prince Imrahil said, "Your words, Lord, are wise, if one who is a kinsman of the Lord Denethor may counsel you in this matter. He is strong-willed and proud, but old, and his mood has been strange since his son was stricken down. Yet I would not have you remain like a beggar at the door." "Not a beggar," said Aragorn. "Say a captain of the rangers, who are unused to cities and houses of stone." And he commanded that his banner should be furled. And he did off the star of the North Kingdom, and gave it to the keeping of the sons of Elrond. Then the Prince Imrahil and Éomer of Rohan left him, and passed through the city and the tumult of the people, and mounted to the citadel, and they came to the hall of the tower, seeking the steward. But they found his chair empty, and before the dais lay Theoden, king of the Mark, upon a bed of state, and 12 torches stood about it, and 12 guards, knights both of Rohan and Gondor, and the hangings of the bed were of green and white, but upon the king was laid the great cloth of gold up to his breast, and upon that his unsheathed sword, and at his feet his shield. The light of the torches shimmered in his white hair like sun in the spray of a fountain, but his face was fair and young, save that a piece lay on it beyond the reach of youth, and it seemed that he slept. When they had stood silent for a time beside the king, Imrahil said, "Where is the steward? And where also is Mithrandir?" And one of the guards answered, "The steward of Gondor is in the houses of healing." But Éomer said, "Where is the lady Éowyn, my sister? For surely she should be lying beside the king, and in no less honor. Where have they bestowed her?" And Imrahil said, "But the lady Éowyn was yet living when they bore her hither. Did you not know?" Then hope unlooked for came so suddenly to Éomer's heart, and with it the bite of care and fear renewed, that he said no more, but turned and went swiftly from the hall, and the prince followed him. And when they came forth, evening had fallen, and many stars were in the sky. And there came Gandalf on foot, and with him one cloaked in grey, and they met before the doors of the houses of healing, and they greeted Gandalf and said, "We seek the steward, and men say that he is in this house. Has any hurt befallen him? And the lady Éowyn, where is she?" And Gandalf answered, "She lies within, and is not dead, but is near death. But the Lord Faramir was wounded by an evil dart, as you have heard. And he is now the steward, for Denethor has departed, and his house is in ashes." And they were filled with grief and wonder at the tale that he told. But Imrahil said, "So victory is shorn of gladness, and it is bitter bought if both Gondor and Rohan are in one day bereft of their lords. Éomer rules the Rohirrim, Who shall rule the city meanwhile? Shall we not send now for the Lord Aragorn? And the cloaked man spoke and said, He is come. And they saw as he stepped into the light of the lantern by the door that it was Aragorn, wrapped in the grey cloak of Lorien above his mail, and bearing no other token than the green stone of Galadriel. I have come because Gandalf begs me to do so, he said. But for the present I am but the captain of the Dunedain of Honor, and the Lord of Dol Amroth shall rule the city until Faramir awakes. But it is my counsel that Gandalf should rule us all in the days that follow, and in our dealings with the enemy. And they agreed upon that. Then Gandalf said, Let us not stay at the door, for the time is urgent. Let us enter. For it is only in the coming of Aragorn that any hope remains for the sick that lie in the house. Thus spake Eorith, wise woman of Gondor. Oh, that's an I, not an L. I've been saying Lorith, but it's Eorith. It's an I. It looks like a lowercase L, but it's a capital I. Eorith. The wise woman of Gondor, the hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and so shall the rightful king be known. Then Aragorn entered first, and the others followed. And there at the door were 2 guards in the livery of the citadel, one tall, but the other scarce the height of a boy. And when she saw them, he cried aloud in surprise and joy, Strider, how splendid! Do you know? I guessed it was you in the black ships, but they were all shouting Corsairs and wouldn't listen to me. How did you do it? Aragorn laughed and took the hobbit by the hand. Well met indeed, he said, but there is not time yet for travelers' tales. But Imrahil said to Eomer, Is it thus that we speak to our kings? Yet maybe he will wear his crown in some other name. And Aragorn, hearing him, turned and said, Verily, for in the high tongue of old I am Elisar, the Elfstone, and Envenyatar, the Renewer. And he lifted from his breast the green stone that lay there. But Strider shall be the name of my house, if that be ever published. In the high tongue it will not sound so ill, and Telcontar I will be, and all the heirs of my body. And with that they passed into the house, and as they went toward the rooms where the sick were tended, Gandalf told the deeds of Eowyn and Meriadoc. For, he said, long have I stood by them, and at first they spoke much in their dreaming before they sank into the deadly darkness. Also it is given to me to see many things far off. Aragorn went first to Faramir, and then to Lady Eowyn, and last to Merry. When he had looked on the faces of the sick, and seen their hurts, he sighed. Here I must put forth all such power and skill as is given to me, he said. Would that Elrond were here, for he is the eldest of all our race, and has the greater power. And Eomer, seeing that he was both sorrowful and weary, said, First you must rest, surely, and at the least eat a little. But Aragorn answered, Nay, for these 3, and most soon for Faramir, time is running out. All speed is needed. Then he called to Eorith, and he said, You have store in this house of the herbs of healing. Yes, lord, she answered, but not enough, I reckon, for all that will need them. But I am sure I do not know where we shall find more, for all things are amiss in these dreadful days, what with fires and burnings, and the lads that run errands so few, and all the roads blocked. Why, it is days out of count since ever a carrier came in from Lussernach to the market. But we do our best in this house with what we have, and I am sure your lordship will know. I will judge that when I see, said Aragorn. One thing also is short, time for speech. Have you Atheles? I do not know, I am sure, lord, she answered. At least not by that name. I will go and ask of the herb master. He knows all the old names. It is also called Kingsfoil, said Aragorn, and maybe you know it by that name, for so the country folk call it in these latter days. Oh, that, said Eorith. Well, if your lordship had named it at first, I could have told you. No, we have none of it, I am sure. Why, I have never heard that it had any great virtue, and indeed I have often said to my sisters, when we came upon it growing in the woods, Kingsfoil, I said, 'tis a strange name, and I wonder why 'tis called so, for if I were a king, I would have plants more bright in my garden. Still, it smells sweet when bruised, does it not? If sweet is the right word, wholesome maybe is nearer. Wholesome, verily, said Aragorn. And now, dame, if you love the Lord Faramir, run as quick as your tongue, and get me Kingsfoil, if there is a leaf in the city. And if not, said Gandalf, I will ride to Lossarnach, with Eorith behind me, and she shall take me to the woods, but not to her sisters, and Shadowfox shall show me the meaning of haste. When Eorith was gone, Aragorn bade the other women to make water hot. Then he took Faramir's hand in his, and laid the other hand upon the sick man's brow. It was drenched with sweat, but Faramir did not move or make any sign, and seemed hardly to breathe. He is nearly spent, said Aragorn, turning to Gandalf, but this comes not from the wound. See, that is healing. Had he been smitten by some dart of the Nazgul, so as you thought, he would have died that night. This hurt was given by some Southron arrow, I would guess. Who drew it forth? Was it kept? I drew it forth, said Imrahil, and staunched the wound. But I did not keep the arrow, for we had much to do. It was, as I remember, just such a dart as the Southrons use. Yet I believed that it came from the shadows above, for else his fever and sickness were not to be understood, since the wound was not deep or vital. How then do you read the matter? Weariness, grief for the father's mood, a wound, and over all the black breath, said Aragorn. He is a man of staunch will, for already he had come close under the shadow before ever he rode to battle on the outwalls. Slowly the dark must have crept on him, even as he fought and strove to hold his outpost. Would that I could have been here sooner. Thereupon the herb-master entered. Your lordship asked for Kingsfoil, as the rustics name it, he said, or Athelas in the noble tongue, or to those who know somewhat of the Valinorian. I do so, said Aragorn, and I care not whether you say now Essia Erenon or Kingsfoil, so long as you have come. Your pardon, my lord, said the man. I see you are a lore-master, not merely a captain of war. But alas, sir, we do not keep this thing in the houses of healing, where only the gravely hurt or sick are tended. For it has no virtue that we know of, save perhaps to sweeten a fouled air, or to drive away some passing heaviness, unless, of course, you give heed to rhymes of old days, which women such as our good Eorith still repeat without understanding. When the black breath blows, and death's shadow grows, and all lights pass, come Athelas, life to the dying in the king's hand lying. It is but a doggerel, I fear, garbled in the memory of old wives. Its meaning I leave in to your judgment, if indeed it has any, but old folks still use an infusion of the herb for headaches. Then in the name of the king go and find some old man of less lore and more wisdom who keeps some in his house, cried Gandalf. Now Aragorn knelt beside Faramir and held a hand upon his brow, and those that watched felt that some great struggle was going on, for Aragorn's face grew grey with weariness, and ever and anon he called the name of Faramir, but each time more faintly to their hearing, as if Aragorn himself was removed from them and walked afar in some dark vale calling for one that was lost. At last Burgle came running in, and he bore 6 leaves in a cloth. It is Kingsfoil, sir, he said, but not fresh, I fear. It must have been culled 2 weeks ago at the least. I hope it will serve, sir. Then, looking at Faramir, he burst into tears, but Aragorn smiled. It will serve, he said. The worst is now over. Stay and be comforted. Then taking 2 leaves, he laid them on his hands, and breathed on them, and then he crushed them, and straightway a living freshness filled the room, as if the air itself awoke and tingled, sparkling with joy. And then he cast the leaves into the bowls of steaming water that were brought to him, and at once all the hearts were lightened, for the fragrance that came to each was like a memory of dewy mornings, of unshadowed sun in some land of which the fair world in spring is itself but a fleeting memory. But Aragorn stood up as one refreshed, and his eyes smiled as he held a bowl before Faramir's dreaming face. "Well now, who would have believed it?" said Eorith to a woman that stood beside her. "The weed is better than I thought. It reminds me of the roses of Imloth Melui when I was a lass, and no king could ask for better." Suddenly Faramir stirred, and he opened his eyes, and he looked on Aragorn, who bent over him, and a light of knowledge and love was kindled in his eyes, and he spoke softly. "My lord, you called me. I come. What does the king command?" "Walk no more in the shadows, but awake," said Aragorn. "You are weary. Rest a while, and take food, and be ready when I return." "I will, my lord," said Faramir, "for who would lie idle when the king has returned?" "Farewell, then, for a while," said Aragorn. "I must go to others who need me," and he left the chamber with Gandalf and Imrahil, but Beregond and his son remained behind, unable to contain their joy. As he followed Gandalf and shut the door, Pippin heard Eorith exclaim, "King, did you hear that? What did I say? The hands of a healer, I said." And soon the word had gone out from the house that the king was indeed come among them, and after war he brought healing, and the news ran through the city. But Aragorn came to Éowyn, and he said, "Here there is a grievous hurt and a heavy blow. The arm that was broken has been tended with due skill, and it will mend in time if she has the strength to live. It is the shield arm that is maimed, but the chief evil comes through the sword arm. In that there now seems no life, although it is unbroken. Alas, for she was pitted against a foe beyond the strength of her mind or body, and those who will take a weapon to such an enemy must be sterner than steel, if the very shock shall not destroy them. It was an evil doom that set her in this path, for she is a fair maiden, fairest lady of a house of queens, and yet I know not how I should speak of her. When I first looked on her and perceived her unhappiness, it seemed to me that I saw a white flower standing straight and proud, shapely as a lily, and yet knew that it was hard, as if wrought by elf rites out of steel. Or was it, maybe, a frost that had turned its sap to ice, and so it stood, bitter-sweet, still fair to see, but stricken, soon to fall and die. Her malady begins far back before this day, does it not, Éomer?" "I marvel that you should ask me, lord," he answered, "for I hold you blameless in this matter, as in all else. Yet I knew not that Éowyn, my sister, was touched by any frost until she first looked on you. Care and dread she had, and shared with me in the days of Wormtongue and the king's bewitchment, and she tended the king in growing fear, but that did not bring her to this pass." "My friend," said Gandalf, "you had horses and deeds of arms, and the free fields, but she, born in the body of a maid, had a spirit and courage at least the match of yours. Yet she was doomed to wait upon an old man whom she loved as a father, and watch him falling into a mean, dishonored dotage, and her part seemed to her more ignoble than that of the staff he leaned on. Think you that Wormtongue had poison only for Theoden's ears? Dotard, what is the house of Eorl but a thatched barn where brigands drink in the reek, and their brats roll on the floor among their dogs? Have you not heard those words before? Saruman spoke them, the teacher of Wormtongue, though I do not doubt that Wormtongue at home wrapped their meaning in terms more cunning. My lord, if your sister's love for you and her will still bent to her duty had not restrained her lips, you might have heard even such things as these escape them. But who knows what she spoke in the to the darkness alone, in the bitter watches of the night, when all her life seemed shrinking, and the walls of her bower closing in about her, a hunch to trammel some wild thing in. Then Eomer was silent, and looked on his sister, as if pondering anew all the days of their past life together. But Aragorn said, I saw also what you saw, Eomer. Few other griefs amid the ill chances of this world have more bitterness and shame for a man's heart than to behold the love of a lady so fair and brave that cannot be returned. Sorrow and pity have followed me ever since I left her desperate in Dunharrow and rode to the paths of the dead, and no fear upon that way was so present as the fear for what might befall her. And yet, Eomer, I say to you that she loves you more truly than me. For you she loves and knows, but in me she loves only a shadow and a thought, a hope of glory and great deeds, and lands far from the fields of Rohan. I have, maybe, the power to heal her body, and to recall her from the dark valley, but to what she will awake, hope or forgetfulness or despair, I do not know, and if to despair, then she will die, unless other healing comes which I cannot bring. Alas, for her deeds have set her among the queens of great renown. Then Aragorn stooped and looked in her face, and it was indeed white as a lily, cold as frost, and hard as a graven stone. But he bent and kissed her on the brow, and called her softly, saying, Eowyn, Eomund's daughter, awake, for your enemy has passed away. She did not stir, but now she began again to breathe deeply, so that her breast rose and fell beneath the white linen of the sheet. Once more Aragorn bruised 2 leaves of athelas and cast them into the steaming water, and he laved her brow with it, and her right arm lying cold and nerveless on the coverlet. Then, whether Aragorn had indeed some forgotten power of Westernesse, or whether it was but his words of the Lady Eowyn that wrought on them, as the sweet influence of the herbs stole about the chamber, it seemed to those who stood by that a keen wind blew through the window, and it bore no scent, but was an air wholly fresh and clean and young, as if it had not before been breathed by any living thing, and came new made from snowy mountains high beneath a dome of stars, or from shores of silver far away washed by seas of foam. Awake, Eowyn, Lady of Rohan, said Aragorn again, and he took her right hand in his and felt it warm with life returning. Awake! The shadow is gone, and all darkness is washed clean. Then he laid her hand in Eomer's and stepped away. Call her, he said, and he passed silently from the chamber. Eowyn, Eowyn, cried Eomer amid his tears, but she opened her eyes and said, Eomer, what joy is this? For they said that you were slain. Nay, but that was only the dark voices in my dream. How long have I been dreaming? Not long, my sister, said Eomer, but think no more on it. I am strangely weary, she said. I must rest a little, but tell me, what of the Lord of the Mark? Alas, do not tell me that was a dream, for I know that it was not. He is dead, as he foresaw. He is dead, said Eomer, but he bade me say farewell to Eowyn, dearer than daughter. He lies now in a great honour in the citadel of Gondor. That is grievous, she said, and yet it is good beyond all that I dared hope in the dark days, when it seemed that the house of Eorl was sunk in honour less than any shepherd's cot. And what of the king's esquire, the halfling? Eomer, you shall make him a knight of the Riddermark, for he is valiant. He lies nearby in this house, and I will go to him, said Gandalf. Sorry, that's Gandalf. Eomer shall stay here for a while, but do not speak yet of war or woe until you are made whole again. Great gladness it is to see you wake again to health and hope, so valiant a lady. To health, said Eowyn. It may be so, at least while there is an empty saddle of some fallen rider that I can fill, and there are deeds to do, but to hope, I do not know. Gandalf and Pippin came to Merry's room, and there they found Aragorn standing by the bed. "Poor old Merry," said Pippin, and he ran to the bedside, for it seemed to him that his friend looked worse, and a grayness was in his face, as if a weight of years of sorrow lay on him, and suddenly a fear seized Pippin that Merry would die. "Do not be afraid," said Aragorn. "I came in time, and I have called him back. He is weary now and grieved, and he has taken a hurt like the Lady Eowyn, daring to smite that deadly thing. But these evils can be amended, so strong and gay a spirit is in him. His grief he will not forget, but it will not darken his heart. It will teach him wisdom." Then Aragorn laid his hand on Merry's head, and passing his hand gently through the brown curls, he touched the eyelids and called him by name. And when the fragrance of Aethelas stole through the room, like the scent of orchards and of heather in the sunshine full of bees, suddenly Merry awoke, and he said, "I am hungry. What's the time?" "Past supper time now," said Pippin, "though I dare say I could bring you something if they will let me." "They will indeed," said Gandalf, "and anything else that this rider of Rohan may desire, it can be found in Minas Tirith, where his name is in honor." "Good," said Merry. "Then I would like supper first, and after that a pipe." And at that his face clouded. "No, not a pipe. I don't think I'll smoke again." "Why not?" said Pippin. "Well," answered Merry slowly, "he is dead. It has brought it all back to me. He said he was sorry he had never had a chance of talking herb lore with me, almost the last thing he ever said. I shan't ever be able to smoke again without thinking of him, and that day, Pippin, when he rode up to Isengard and was so polite." "Smoke then, and think of him," said Aragorn, "for he was a gentle heart, and a great king, and kept his oaths, and he rose out of the shadows to a last fair morning. Though your service to him was brief, it should be a memory glad and honorable to the end of your days." Merry smiled. "Well then," he said, "if Strider will provide what is needed, I will smoke and think. I had some of Saruman's best in my pack, but what became of it in the battle I am sure I don't know." "Master Meriadoc," said Aragorn, "if you think that I have passed through the mountains and the realm of Gondor with fire and sword to bring herbs and a careless soldier who throws away his gear, you are mistaken. Herbs to a careless soldier who throws away his gear, you're mistaken. If your pack has not been found, then you must send for the herb master of this house, and he will tell you that he did not know that the herb you desire, had any virtues, but that it is called Westmansweed by the vulgar, and Galanas by the noble, and other names in other tongues more learned, and after adding a few half-forgotten rhymes that he does not understand, he will regretfully inform you that there is none in the house, and he will leave you to reflect on the history of tongues. And so now must I, for I have not slept in such a bed as this since I rode from Dunharrow, nor eaten since the dark before dawn." Merry seized his hand and kissed it. "I am frightfully sorry," he said. "Go at once, ever since that night at Bree when we had been a nuisance to you, but it is the way of my people to use light words at such times and say less than they mean. We fear to say too much. It robs us of the right words when a jest is out of place." "I know that well, or I would not deal with you in the same way," said Aragorn. "May the Shire live forever unwithered." And kissing Merry he went out, and Gandalf went with him. Pippin remained behind. "Was there ever anyone like him?" he said, "except Gandalf, of course. I think they must be related. My dear, your pack is lying by your bed, and you had it on your back when I met you. He saw it all the time, of course, and anyway, I have some stuff of my own. Come on now, Longbottom Leaf it is. Fill it up while I run and see about some food, and then let's be easy for a bit. Dear me, we tooks and brandybucks, we can't live long on the heights." "No," said Merry, "I can't, not yet at any rate. But at least, Pippin, we can now see them and honor them. It is best to love first what you are fitted to love, I suppose. You must start somewhere and have some roots, and the soil of the Shire is deep. Still, there are things deeper and higher, and not a gaffer could tend this garden in what he calls peace but for them, whether he knows about them or not. I am glad that I know about them a little, but I don't know why I am talking like this. Where is the leaf? And get my pipe out of my pack if it isn't broken. Aragorn and Gandalf went now to the warden of the houses of healing, and they counseled him that Faramir and Eowyn should remain there and still be tended with care for many days. The Lady Eowyn, said Aragorn, will wish soon to rise and depart, but she should not be permitted to do so, if you can in any way restrain her, until at least 10 days be past. As for Faramir, said Gandalf, he must soon learn that his father is dead. But the full tale of the madness of Denethor should not be told to him until he is quite healed and has duties to do. See that Beregond and the Perian who were present do not speak of him to him of these things yet. And the other Perian, Meriadoc, who is under my care, what of him? Said the warden. It's likely, It is likely that he will be fit to arise tomorrow for a short while, said Aragorn. Let him do so if he wishes. He may walk a little in the care of his friends. They are a remarkable race, said the warden, nodding his head. Very tough in the fibre, I deem. At the doors of the houses many were already gathered to see Aragorn, and they followed after him. And when at last he had supped, men came and prayed that he would heal their kinsmen or their friends whose lives were in peril, through hurt or wound, or who lay under the black shadow. And Aragorn arose and went out, and he sent for the sons of Elrond, and together they laboured far into the night. And word went through the city, the king is come again indeed, and they named him Elfstone because of the green stone that he wore, and so the name with which it was foretold at his birth that he should bear was chosen for him by his own people. And when he could labour no more, he cast his cloak about him, and slipped out of the city, and went to his tent just ere dawn, and slept for a little. And in the morning the banner of Dol Amroth, a white ship like a swan upon blue water, floated from the tower, and men looked up and wondered if the coming of the king had been but a dream. That is the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9 is called The Last Debate, and we'll read that one tomorrow. And God bless you. I hope that you are enjoying the reading of The Lord of the Rings. We are coming to the end of Book 5, and Book 6 is back to Frodo and Sam. We've got 2 chapters left of Book 5. I think we've got an art gallery coming, so I will leave you now with Kimberly, and God bless you.
So I drew this. I thought it was really cool. Do you like it?
Eowyn standing in front of the non-school?
Not exactly, but I guess you could interpret it that way if you like. I guess I was self-consciously inspired by what happened. Thank you for tuning in to Heavy D Storytelling. Have a good night. Goodbye.